I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. I'd like to welcome everybody for attending tonight's meeting. This is the July 27th, 2022 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Chesapeake Beach, Maryland. Madam Clerk, please record that we have actually all of our commissioners here except Jen Rutke. We do have Lori Blackwelder here. She's in the back room. Can you go back and get Lori?
She's back there.
I think she is. Would you mind? Thank you. All of our commissioners. Let me introduce the one over here. We have Larry Brown and we have Kelly Hahn. Lori Blackwelder here in a moment. And if Jan Rutke shows up, she's on the end here. And if anybody here would like to speak at our public hearing, there will be public comment forms on the very back. I think all of you have all signed in. If you haven't, please pick up a sheet back there. And there's a pen back there. And then, of course, Mrs. Hahn must have that form so that we can put you on the list. Okay. I'd like to wait 1 second while we get Ms. Blackwelder in here for our minutes and our approval of the agenda.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
We have a restroom here. If we're getting ready to start. Very well. Thank you so much. Sorry. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and continue. I would like to ask for approval of the July 27th agenda.
I approve.
I hear a second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes of June 23rd, 2022.
I approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Would you like to abstain on that? So we'll have one abstention and 3 ayes. Okay, I'm going to go to number 5 on our agenda, which is introducing our new member, Kelly Hahn, who's sitting here to my left. She has been on our commission for 2 months now, but this is her first meeting. So, Mrs. Hahn, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
My name's Kelly Hahn. I grew up in Calvert County. I currently work for the federal government, and I live in Richfield Station. I'm looking forward to continuing to serve Chesapeake Beach.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. And now I'd like to offer a thank you to Mr. Brown, who's sitting here to my right. He has served as our chair on this commission for the past 2 years. He was able to guide us through probably the toughest years that we've had on this commission, at least that I've been on here, because he had to guide us through the pandemic. That was really tough. We all had to learn how to have meaningful discussions and public comments while being distracted by technical challenges, all while putting together one of the most important documents this town is required to create, and that's the comprehensive plan. So the commission is grateful for his ability to keep us organized and structured. He never missed a meeting and always allowed for transparency and open communication. Mr. Brown, we all thank you for your service. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to go to number 7. We're going to move to the public hearing section of the agenda. The mayor has called this public hearing so that planning commission members can receive comments on the following 2 subjects. First is the comprehensive rezoning of the town of Chesapeake Beach. This rezoning is to update the town's official zoning map, which is guided by the comprehensive plan on April 21, 2022 by the mayor and town council. And second is a set of amendments to the text of the town's zoning ordinances. This commission, after receiving your testimony, will, if time permits, then again at a workshop on August 4th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and also on August 24th, 2022. Both meetings are open to the public. The Planning and Zoning Commission is strictly advisory, so our responsibility is to then send recommendations to the town council, where the council will then have more deliberations and another public hearing on these items before making final decisions. So before I open the public hearing, allow me to share a few matters of housekeeping. First of all, as you know, we have to sign in. Next, if you have a question, make sure that when you fill anything out, you fill out a question and then have a way for Mr. Jakubiak to call you back or send you an email or however you want us to contact you. And once you're called up to the podium, speak clearly into the microphone and give your name and address, and you will then have 3 minutes to provide your comments. When time is called, please complete your thoughts and take your seat. The commissioners will be taking notes, but will not be providing comments during the public hearing. Finally, we do appreciate your attendance tonight and participation with the public hearing. If you have any more comments, please email them to the town hall by August 1st, and we will still have time to review them. I would now like to call on Sharon Hom, the town clerk, secretary to the commission, to present evidence of the published notice of this hearing.
The public hearing for the comprehensive rezoned and updated zoning map and supporting text amendments to the zoning ordinance was advertised in the Southern Maryland News newspaper for 3 weeks beginning July 8th and continued in the July 15th and July 22nd editions. On July 1st, 2021, the notice was also posted on the town's website, along with the materials which make up the subject of this hearing. On July 8th, the Planning and Zoning Administrator provided clarification on the Resource Conservation Zoning District in a short video, which was linked on the town's website as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hum. Okay, I will now open the public hearing. The first speaker will be Mr. Jakubiak, the town's Planning and Zoning Administrator. He will summarize the text amendments, provide an explanation of the comprehensive zoning, rezoning, and highlight for the record several ordinance changes that would be required if the text amendments, as currently drafted, were ultimately approved by the mayor and town council. Mr. Jakubiak.
Thank you.
So the first subject of tonight's hearing is the proposed new zoning map. About every 10 years, when the Planning Commission completes its comprehensive plan, the next step is to follow that with a new zoning map. The zoning map implements the land use plan that's part of the comprehensive plan.
Can everybody in the back hear?
Okay, good, thank you. So the new zoning map does several principal things. It expands the amount of resource conservation zone. That zone has existed in the town for 20 years, and it applies this zone to additional areas within the community. It divides the residential village district into residential village 1 and residential village 2, and it divides the commercial zone into 4 subcategories of commercial zoning, and it eliminates the maritime zone, creating instead a maritime commercial zone. Those are the principal changes that are on the map. And of course, the boundaries of these various zones have changed somewhat too. There are a number of large format maps throughout the town hall tonight. We printed quite a few of these smaller versions, and folks can have these and take them home. And of course, it's posted on the town's website. In addition to that, and in part because of this map, a number of text amendments had to be made. So the zoning ordinance is both a map and a set of laws that the town, that governs land use within the town. And the amendments are numbered 1 through 10. And I'm just going to quickly touch on what each one is addresses without any getting into any real detail. But Amendment 1 amends Section 290-19A, the tables and requirements, and it addresses the building height within the high-density zone and the maritime zone, and brings those heights down to 35 feet as a max. Amendment 2 eliminates a special provision that governs how building height is measured for multifamily buildings and commercial zoning, commercial uses, meaning that all buildings within the town, irrespective of the use, will be capped at 35 feet as measured from the ground to the midpoint between the eaves and the ridge line of a roof if it's sloped. So the 35-foot definition in the current code would apply universally in all zones and in all building types. Amendment 3 eliminates the bonus density overlay district. This was a special district that provided added flexibility to property owners to develop in a more intense way if they met certain design required performance measures. That entire section of the code would be eliminated. In Amendment 4 addresses the same thing, and it also references the fact that wherever in the code bonus density overlay is referred to, it should be removed. Amendment 5 creates a new purpose statement for the new district that's called Residential Village, and it modifies, or Residential Village 1, and it modifies the purpose statement applicable to what will become Residential Village 2. Every zoning district within the town has a purpose statement so that we can see what the intention is with respect to land use and development within the districts. Amendment 6 eliminates the purpose statements associated with the commercial zone and the maritime district because those districts would be eliminated, as I mentioned earlier, and it creates new purpose statements for the neighborhood commercial district, the town commercial district, the commercial plaza district, and the maritime commercial district. Amendment 7 revises the language that describes the purpose of the resource conservation district. Amendment 8 provides a definition of tourist home, or also known as short-term rental. It adds a definition within the code. It doesn't permit short-term rentals. It just simply adds a definition for the use. Amendment 9 creates a requirement for open space within new residential developments of 3 or more housing units. Open space would need to be created at a rate of 1,000 square feet per housing unit, and that open space would be common open space available to the users, the occupants of the subdivision or housing development. Amendment 10 modifies the Table 290-19 and addresses the amount of open space required on a lot. It increases it from 15% to 35% within the residential village districts, and increases it from 15% to 35% within the residential high density district. And then Amendment 11 is a new table of permitted uses. One of the foundational parts of the zoning ordinance is it defines what land uses are permittable within every zoning category. And Chesapeake Beach codifies that through the use of a table so that you can go down the table on the left side and see all the various uses, for instance, single family, detached, churches, various offices or businesses or marinas. And then across the various columns, you could see if that use is permitted, not permitted, it's a conditional use, or it's a special exception use. So the Planning Commission has updated this table to reflect the main policies in the comprehensive plan. So those are the main changes tonight. Now, as these changes are being made, of necessity, there are a number of other changes. In a document the size of the zoning ordinance, there are a lot of references and cross-references. So when you add a new zoning category, we have to find where in the zoning ordinance the category might be mentioned and eliminated it. Those are housekeeping changes, and they're not substantive. They don't change the meaning, and they're not intended to be the primary purpose of gathering tonight. But they're important to reference, and I wanted to mention those just for the record. So this is kind of my testimony to the Planning Commission. Section 290.11 is the section of the zoning ordinance that provides various conditions for the types of uses. And those conditions apply to the various zoning categories. So when the table of permitted uses changes, because we're creating new categories, the section 290.11 has to change. So where we might say residential village, now we're saying residential village 1 and 2. So section 290.11 is specifically connected to the table of permitted uses. It's not different from that. So there's a number of clerical changes that need to be made to that table. A similar and second change would be section 290.19G2 of the zoning ordinance. Here, the RV, residential village district, is mentioned, but will be replaced by new districts, the RV1 and RV2. So this district concerns self-supporting decks within the residential district, and logically, the RV district, the term RV needs to be replaced with RV1 and RV2 because this specific requirement about decks would apply to both residential zones. The third instance is landscaping and concerns landscaping and screening requirements in section 290.21E3. This section says that when a parking lot's landscaping strip is adjacent to an RV district, a compact evergreen hedge is required to reduce the visual impact. Logically, in this case, we need to replace RV district, RV1, and RV2 district. Again, the next instance concerns section 290-22B, and this concerns signs. And here, this section refers to residential districts and commercial districts. And depending on what type of district, the neighborhood commercial, town commercial, commercial plaza, and maritime commercial. Previously, they were simply commercial and maritime. With the change of districting mapping, this sentence changes. And then the residential districts, of course, are the RV1, RV2, low density and high density. So that clerical change is to be made. And lastly, section 290.13. This is a unique section within the Chesapeake zoning code. It's basically a use it or lose it zoning provision. It basically says when the town approves a commercial, if it approves a commercial zoning, the applicant or the owner has a certain limited period of time to actually pull a permit and develop a commercial building. If they don't do it within a certain period of time, then the zoning reverts to its original. Of course, with the removal of the commercial district, this section would be removed. It wouldn't be applicable. So, Madam Chair, those are the main comments I wanted to get onto the record, and that was my summary of the changes being contemplated tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Jakubiec.
You're welcome.
And welcome to our commissioners for the evening. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next person on the list for speaking, and it's Serena Arcari. So, Serena, are you here? Okay, she's the one that we have to read, I think, right? Yes, okay. Should we go ahead and read her comments? It was actually an internet comment. Should we read it for the record?
It's not necessary to read it for the record, but you could. If you do, you should read all the ones that are submitted in writing, unless the applicant,
Okay,
this person's here.
I will go ahead and read it for the record. Her, it's Serena Akari, 8199 Windward Key Drive. Her primary concern is that the new language appears to prevent me from replacing my current townhome in Woodward Key in kind should it be destroyed by some form of disaster. The existing structure is higher than 35 feet. I would respectfully request adding language that permits replacing in-kind structures that currently exist with RHD. Current height limit for RHD is 50 feet. 290-19D sets out exceptions to minimum lot sizes and widths. Section 290-19D3 describes conditions under which a single-family detached dwelling on a non-conforming lot can be rebuilt. Subparagraph C also requires that height of replacement cannot exceed original, except to account for required flood protection elevations. And then she continues, scenario, the proposal would reduce height limits for RHD to 35 feet. Chesapeake Beach is hit by a major hurricane or tornado, causing extensive damage to one or more attached homes in an RHD zone, such that the original buildings must be demolished and rebuilt. Question, section 290-19D3 provides certain exceptions for non-conforming lots with single-family detached dwellings. So I think basically her question, can she rebuild to the same height that she was at originally? Okay, so that was Serena Akari. John McKay, are you?
actually have serious questions. I'm just listening to it right now.
Okay, would you like to?
Several questions.
Why don't you just come up and make your comment for the record? We'll have them.
I own several lots around the lake out back, and they're all being rezoned. So it's going to sit. I'll own that forever. I'll have tax liability that I can't do anything with the land. I want to know what's going to happen to that. I want to know why my house is being rezoned as resource conservation. I want to know what this does to the property.
Okay.
I live at 3559 Cox. It's the brick and yellow house right at the top of the hill. Everyone can see from the town. So I understand you want to keep everything beautiful and we want to make the town better. I want to know what this does to the land that I own all around the lake.
Mr. McKay, did you leave a phone number for Mr. Chukubia to call you back, or how would you like to?
No, I was speaking to him today. I was going to wait and give him all that information later.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you. That's Deutsch.
Actually, I represent residents of Windward Key. Serena Akari pretty much described her concerns. We're just across the street, and we are concerned about the maximum height restrictions that would affect us if we had to replace or rebuild portions of our community as a result of a hurricane or tornado. Where in the proposed ordinance are those exceptions similar to those in section 190-19 that would apply to buildings in the residential high density zone?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deutsch. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you. Mr. Deutsch, should you leave a phone number or a way that Mr. Jakubiak can contact you, or we can talk to him after the meeting?
I can do that. I mean, I think I submitted via the internet too comments, and I probably left the phone number.
Okay, okay,
To ask for it.
okay. Thank you. Amy Everett?
Hi, I'm Amy Everett. You need my address, correct? 3447 Hillgale, so it's Chesapeake Village.
Yes, thank you.
So I really want to know why. Why are we wanting to increase the density of our housing and commercial infrastructure here? And I feel that the good of the residents that live here is being compromised for the developer's gain. So first of all, I'm worried about the small town feel that we have here and the current limitations on our infrastructure. So the town plan that was just approved indicates a desire to build within the existing cottage feel of the town and acknowledges that there are already existing constraints on the roads and schools. So the proposed rezoning plans are counterproductive to those desires. It makes no sense to me. Multifamily homes, like duplexes and quadplexes, those can be built in a manner that adheres to this cottage look. An apartment building can, I know apartment buildings have been proposed for here that do not adhere to that look. Also, we have 2 thoroughfares. There's no room for them to be expanded. The state has control of them. We don't understand, by the town's own admission, we don't understand the resort's potential burden on our roads. So when you drive into town and if you build out that area of Cox Road to 170 new units with apartment buildings that look like Ocean City, one, that's not a small town look that you drive into. And that adds to the congestion that's already right there. That's not including any of the other density that's being proposed for the rest of the town. I really want to make sure that we protect our wooded areas. I know you did your video. I still have concerns. I want something written in absolute terms that there are distinct boundaries to our existing developments, because Chesapeake Village, they're still in a fight right now about the lands behind our homes. And I want that wherever this resource conservation area is supposed to be, I want it to implicitly state that it is not to allow for any further development in any way. The town has noted that they are deficient in parkland and open spaces, and many of us have purchased homes with the promise that the open space or the woods behind us will never be developed on. That's a huge concern when it now butts right up to my fence, and I don't know what's going to happen behind my house. My main concern too is infill. The town plan specifically says that it will have very limited infill, and yet the rezoning plan encourages infill. I don't want increased density. I don't know many people who want increased density. I don't understand what that brings to the people of this town. So I voted for town council members that promised me that this would not be allowed to occur. And I hope that you guys can make those recommendations to hold them accountable. And those are my concerns.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Zhang. Andrew Zhang. Okay, Mark Petrakis. Mark? Okay, it looks like we have an email, actually. You have Andrew Zhang.
Danielle, who withdrawn.
Well, let me go back to Andrew Zhang. He wrote, I guess he's just running it on through email. Zoning proposals in the past have been fraught with conflicts or perceived conflicts. The town council and zoning commission should publish a clear, independent legal statement of fact for the benefit of our citizens. Such a statement of fact would disclose the personal impacts or benefits the zoning change would provide to individual members on the town council or zoning commission members. Okay, that's Mr. Zhang. And then Mr. Petrakis, let's see. He's at 3020 Lauren Court. What is the intent of rezoning the open space and residue parcels associated with the Chesapeake Village neighborhood? The Chesapeake Village HOA conducted a poll of its members and asked the following: should the neighborhood of Chesapeake Village and all of its open spaces and residue parcels be reflected in the town of Chesapeake Beach official zoning ordinance map as an intact neighborhood with a single zone, or rezoning as proposed to a separate zone that may either be protected or developed in the future? 97% of the responses felt that Chesapeake Village should be reflected on the map as an intact neighborhood. And then we have Gary Goldsmith. He is at 8200 Elm Lane. I'm writing you to oppose the proposed zoning district change of areas in the Wickersham subdivision from the current RV to RC. Proposed change would devalue our properties and place huge restrictions for development that did not apply when the properties were purchased. These are all lots of record in a subdivision recorded in 1910. I've attached a letter from the zoning administrator that both states the property would be buildable, although difficult due to the topographic and environment conditions, and that they are all part of an officially adopted plan for water and sewer service areas, per the Calvert County Comprehensive Water and Sewer Plan. I request that the Wickersham area of the draft change not be amended to the RC district and only be revised to an RV1 or RV2 districts as our neighbors and previous district zoning. Okay, there's Mr. Goldsmith. We have Greg Shelton.
People who have lots now, especially ones that meet the requirements of the 6,000 square foot. What would this do to change, if any, their properties?
Did you
As far as being able to leave property to like grandkids or whatever that have value, in, or should we? Or
If you want to leave that question for Mr. Jakubiec, he will contact Jack about that, Mr. Shelton.
okay, I wanted to put it on comments, but thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Does he have an email to contact you with?
Yes.
Josh Phillips. And Mr. Phillips, please give us your address to.
7013 Silver Charm Lane, Chesapeake Beach, Maryland. 20732. How are you guys? Okay, so first, double tap that. Everything she don't, but whatever she said, I agree with it. Like, I'm down with it. I live at Chesapeake Village too. All of her concerns are my concerns. Secondly, I got a couple kids, one of which is at Beach Elementary. As soon as the new Beach Elementary opens, that's at capacity, right? And so according to this, there's no numbers on this, but as soon as these new developments open up, I've got an at capacity elementary school that is already over capacity that is going to be taking an influx of new students. So do we know how many new people are coming in? Like, homes are districted in according to these maps? No.
No, we don't. We're not going to be answering questions at this point.
Okay, copy that. So just assuming that that we have an overflow already in the entry school and Windy Hill, Northern High School that we have no plan to accompany. So concerned about that. And what about the infrastructure? Like a couple of years ago, we talked about like all of our taxes went up because of the water treatment plant in North Beach. We've got all these other people coming in. Are we having any plans to? I'm concerned, I'm not asking questions, but I am concerned about the infrastructure of our current system with the influx of people coming in with an unknown number of homes and individuals moving in. It's already tough enough to live here in the summer with folks coming here and gambling and doing all this stuff and getting caught in traffic and don't even try to get out of here on the 4th of July. Been here 39 years. I feel like when I first moved in with my parents to come here because of the schools, the glass was a quarter of the way full. And if I had a glass in front of you with a big amount of water, it would be overflowing. Like, I don't know how we are sustainable. So that's all I have for the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you. Nicole Maldonado.
I live at 8117 Woodland Lane in Richfield Station. And I have concerns that have been voiced about what are you going to do with the increased population, the more people, more problems. We already can't hold what we have, the roads, the traffic. That what we have now is a nice place to live. It won't be if you increase the population. It will no longer be a nice place to live. And people are going to want to move out because I know I won't want to be stuck on 260 and there are no other routes and there's nowhere to put them. So that's the reality. We know what the reality is. We know what the limitations are, whether they're written limitations or said limitations with what has already been said. But in reality, we are limited more than we, I think, realize. So again, I have children that are in the school systems just like that they do. It's gonna pose a problem. We already, like he said, we already have tourists coming down here in the summer times. Right now, it's a nice place to live. Right now, it's a nice place to live. That's what my concern is. Will it be a nice place when you're in traffic trying to get to your development or your house or a store down the street where it used to maybe take 10 minutes and now it's double the time? So I don't know. I feel like adding people, you're going to lose people. I think that's what the result will be. You're going to lose people because people are no longer want to tolerate what that extra population is going to bring. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Poirier? Barbara, did I ask that correctly or not?
Yes, that's
Okay, good.
I don't have an exact question, but I just wanted to appear tonight and on behalf of my other Chesapeake Beach residents and just say, one, I do agree with Amy and with Josh. I wanted to say I feel the same way they do about everything that they've said. So put that on record. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Robin Jones. Please give your address, Ms. Jones.
2411 Woodland Court.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm talking mainly concerned about the change in zoning for the RC around Richfield Station. One thing is the current zoning map doesn't have the FIDs that is in the back of our property, as well as the critical area boundary, and we would like to see that on the zoning map, just because a lot of people aren't aware of it. Let's see what else I have. So the FIDs is important because of the limitations, and we also want to know that will continue, that FIDs agreement will stay in place, and that the town won't get rid of that. The other thing is the table that you alluded to earlier on RC. It still has some areas that it's allowing, like public buildings, recreational facilities, parks, playgrounds, and such. And we have a large 202 acres that belong to the developer for Richfield Station, and that still gives them the ability to build on that land, which is covered by FIDs and forest retention and wetlands and a bunch of different things. So again, with the FIDs, we're concerned with that because in the past there's been changes to the zoning, for example, behind Eagle View Drive, where the FIDs was, there was a reduction and relocation of that, and we don't want to see that happen again. Again, I'm along with the other people that we don't want to see continued development. We already have the developer has an agreement for, I think it's another 102 homes off Stream Walkway and Crestview area, and that's already in a neighborhood of 704 homes. So we just don't need any more development back there. And then the other thing for Richfield Station is the trails that are planned that may come through part of Richfield Station or directly behind housing. We're concerned for safety of residents. Like to know what the town is planning on doing if those trails are built for safety of residents, safety of property, because they'll create additional foot traffic, and we already have issues in the neighborhood with outsiders coming in and vandalizing property, especially our courts and things, and we don't want that to continue or get worse. The last thing regarding that 200 acres by the developer that currently owns that is that we sent a letter, the board sent a letter to Hollywall concerning that. I have extra copies if anybody wants to see what that concerns. But we do have a big concern with that property in particular. So that's all I have.
We have a copy of that letter. We have a
I
copy.
can give him a copy. Would you like a copy?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you.
Sakala?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe Sakala, 6918 Donu Court, also in Chesapeake Village. To be honest, Amy and the other gentleman pretty much said everything I wanted to say. When my wife and we bought our house, this will be our 12th year now. Just again, I think like Amy said, we specifically bought that lot because it backed up to the woods there. And then the way I understood it is that it was protected wetlands and nothing would ever be able to be placed there. So I just kind of wanted to get that on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sakala. Thank you. Joanna Lepping. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Lutterding.
Close,
Yeah.
close. And your address, please?
My address is 805 Woodland Way, Owings, Maryland. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am here to speak for the birds. So, and on behalf of my mentor, the Lorax. I'm a career biologist, and a big reason that my family moved here, very close to specifically for green spaces and wildlife. And we have children, and it's also being for the green spaces. I want to agree with the comment that I think that on the zoning map, the resource conservation areas, I think, should be better distinguished. So I think that there are some areas that are actually quite intensively used, I think, on here that I don't think as qualify as resource conservation compared to like a ball field area that has a lot of use compared to like wetlands compared to forest. So I think that it would be good if that were better outlined. And a reason is that this area is a very important area for wildlife viewers. So the tourism here that people come here from all over. I know birders from all over Maryland, outside of Maryland, who come to this area to bird watch, and they spend their dollars here when they're visiting the area. And so I think anything that would impede or appear to impede any existing green space, the beaches, the marsh, mud flats, forest, any of that, it would be noticed by wildlife observers. And I think they would be very, very disheartened to hear that any of these green spaces could be lost. And actually, just last Friday, we had 4 wood storks on Fishing Creek, which is phenomenal, amazing. And they were here visiting the marsh. So very important. Lots of people came out to see those wood storks, and then they moved to Pennsylvania overnight. And also, I just want to speak to, wildlife is threatened right now. There was a landmark paper in 2019. We have 3 billion birds over the past years that are no longer breeding on our landscapes. So birds and wildlife really need our help. And so anything we can do to sustain them is very important. And also this area, again, it supports those. So horseshoe crabs, this season was a phenomenal season for horseshoe crabs. I don't know if any of you know this, but there were probably 10 times as many horseshoe crabs. There's good things happening here. We want to maintain those. And the final thing I just want to state is that increasing development in this area will increase threats to wildlife. I want to emphasize that any development can be done incorporating wildlife-friendly practices. There's lots of literature out there about ways to develop and to construct at the right time of year to for building design, incorporating bird-friendly glass, thinking about artificial lighting at night and the effects of that on wildlife, and also on people. It stresses us out as well as humans, all of the artificial light at night. And so I just want to emphasize that any development that does happen, please incorporate practices that would limit the negative effects to the wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody who just walked in, if you want to speak, we need to have you fill out a comment card. Somebody back there, did you want to speak? Did you want, you don't, okay. Mr. Rasmussen.
My name is Kenneth Rasmussen, and I live at 4020 12th Street in Chesapeake Beach. And before I say my piece, which is generally in favor of green space as well, I just want to reiterate what you just said and emphasize it. I'm fully endorse everything she just said. I'm specifically speaking about the resource conservation zoning district, firstly, and then secondly, the 35-foot maximum height requirement. So it's very clear that the greatest threat to species diversity is habitat loss. And from what I can see, barring any great errors in the drawings that I've seen, the RC zoning district would protect against the kind of unrelenting habitat loss that's being seen basically all over the country. There are some examples that suggest that we've lost over 50% of our wetlands in the last century. What we can do to prevent further loss, I think, would be a point of pride for our town. So wetlands and riparian forests, which back up the wetlands, if kept intact, will not only draw birds, but will also sustain invertebrates, which many people don't think about, but I happen to think a lot about them. It will also protect the developmental stages of a lot of commercially important game fish. And so biota in general, whether it's avian or faunal, from A to Z, would benefit from us having a substantial off-limits zoning area. The second point is a little bit smaller in a general sense. The maximum height requirement of 35 feet, I cannot endorse enough. I think it's very important that it's a maximum, not an average, because there are such things as sloping roofs, which go from 30 to 50 and have an average of 40, for example. This just makes sense in a town like Chesapeake Beach. I think all agree, virtually all agree, that maintaining a small town feel is a big part of the reason that most of us moved here. In search of that bayside atmosphere, I would hope that we continue to preserve the bay viewscape and, to the extent possible, not crowd out that viewscape with buildings taller than 35 feet. I think that'll help preserve some of the view which we all treasure and which we all came to expect in this bayside town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. Thank you. Danielle Courteville. No. Oh, that's why we took her off the list. There you go. Thank you. And Mr. Donovan.
Wes Donovan, 3418 Cox Road. There's always one in the crowd, and I guess tonight I'm going to be that guy. I have the luxury of having history and know some of the town's history. And, you know, I've been here all my life, worked here all my life in town. And I just want to say one thing about small town charm. The town logo says Chesapeake Beach welcomes you. I forget what year it was. I'm sure Mr. Jakubiak would remember, but Chesapeake Village was annexed into the town. And like the town logo says, it welcomes you. So I just wanted to point that out, that no matter what happens with this comprehensive plan, we're all going to have to live next to one another, continue talking. Our kids are going to go to school together, and it's important, the difference of opinions that we all share, that we maintain that small town charm. The size of a building has absolutely nothing to do with small town charm. It's everyone in this room, and it starts with the leadership of the town. So perception sometimes is reality. The old comprehensive plan allowed for, I think, 325 houses. This new plan is allowing for 58 new houses. So right now, I think there's 2,400 houses here in town. This new plan allows for 58. I really don't think that that's a whole lot of growth. It's what, 2% over the next 10 years. So, 5 houses a year. The infrastructure that was talked about, not having enough water and sewer and here in town. I believe that the capacity of the treatment plant can handle over 800 new houses. So, perception isn't always reality. Sometimes it is. This new plan is very limiting to what can be done in town. There's parts of it that have many contradictions. I'm just going to point out one of them to you. In the Maritime Zone, it's going to require a special exemption for water-dependent seafood processing / fishing activities in the Maritime District. I mean, we've been at this 3.5 years, and we have items like this in it. That's just one example. The other example, or the other thing, lastly, I'd like to say is there's taking of land that's going to happen if everything passes as is in this plan. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Thank you. Have I received all the speakers' comment sheets? Is there anybody else, sir? Would you like to speak in the coming up? No? Okay, do I have a I'm sorry, did you want to speak? Yes, please, please.
Hi, my name is Eric Butler, and I live at 8057 Silver Fox Way. I have concerns about the zoning map, and I feel that it should show the critical area boundaries and the FIDS areas. I see the only benefit from adding this area to the document so that we can spread awareness for all the people who view it. Not everyone who view this document is also going to take a plan. We should add this information as many places as possible. I also have concerns about FIDS restrictions being terminated or shrunk. I feel that we should have association approval from the associations that touch that area before we can modify that space. I feel like that not just for Richfield Station where I live, but for all the associations around, that they may have concerns. I also feel the same about trail improvements, that there should be association approvals because neighborhoods will have their resident safety as their greatest concern. These improvements should also require mandatory wildlife conservation studies. It is important for our town and for our residents that we keep the wildlife that we came here to live for. I also have a question that I would like an answer for. I've provided my contact info here. How does Amendment 9, Section N3, affect additional development in existing neighborhoods? That's the 1,000 foot of open space per dwelling unit. I'm interested in how that affects growth in existing neighborhoods. For example, Richfield Station is going to have another over 100 properties. Does that allow for additional open space? And how does that get measured? Also, our zoned area does allow for some sorts of types of buildings, such as environmental science, research, recreational facilities, playgrounds. This should be considered when we rezone spaces, but not every still be built on, even if it is RC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Yes, thank you, Hannah. To Mrs. Okay, thank you. Do I have any other speakers who would like to speak in this public hearing tonight? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. May I have a motion to close the public hearing? Is there a motion? A second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the dais. Okay, we have a lot of comments that have been, different comments that have been made. Everything from density to height to small town feel, multifamily housing, infill, the RPC designation changing over to the RC zoning district, trails behind HOAs, crime issues, habitat. We have really received a lot of interesting comments. And then, of course, we've had comments saying that we haven't actually allowed for enough development. So let's bring it back to the commissioners. Who would like to bring up any of these issues or talk about anything?
I to maybe Mr. Kubiak can address some of the.
Is your mic on, Lori? I can't. Sorry.
Sorry. So we have some zoning amendments, and they allow for some intensification. And I've done some calculations of what that intensification amounts to. But you have, West Donovan saying that the comprehensive plan says only 58 more houses can come in. So maybe Mr. Jakubiak could address how the zoning amendments correspond to the comprehensive plan.
The Planning Commission adopted a comprehensive plan that had a land use map, a plan that showed future land use, and it indicated the preferred or desirable use of property within a variety of designated areas. So that map has several different colors on it. Each corresponds to a character of development and a list of permitted types of uses. The zoning map, which is the regulation or the set of laws that implements that vision, is very closely tied to it. I think it's really locked in fairly tightly. So in terms of the number of permitted housing units, the residential build-out potential under the plan is substantially below what exists today. So the comprehensive plan reduced the ability to build houses within Chesapeake Beach substantially. We did a build-out analysis where we looked at land that was buildable and zoned for development. And I don't know if the number was 58 or 56 or something to that equivalent, was essentially all that was really remaining. You could do this and slice it a lot of ways and imagine intensification or imagine a redevelopment of an area. So it's conceivable that that number could be different than 56. And but at least based on a reasonable analysis at a comprehensive plan stage, that's the ballpark number. And I guess the key feature of the comprehensive plan was to express an order of magnitude reduction in the residential build out of the town. So I can't be more specific than that, but it is suffice it to say the zoning map through the use of the resource conservation zone and the zoning text amendments by eliminating multifamily development in the commercial zones, reducing building height to 35 feet, and several other techniques, implements the comprehensive plan's goal of reducing the residential build out of the town.
So we don't know how many housing units will be permitted in Chesapeake Beach at this time under these zoning text amendments?
We can't know precisely. But as a matter of basic planning, the number was quoted here about 58. I think the number is probably within 5 or 6 of that as a reasonable number for planning purposes.
Okay. Can you explain that in the context of the Cox Road density? The area in the RV2.
The RV2 allows for residential development potential. Many of those lots are developed already. Some amount of development could take place. There's a small townhouse development there now called Cassidy Courts. There's possibility some additional type of development of that quality or that scale. But it's, you know.
I mean, how many houses could be put there? So we had the situation in Middle Subdivision where we realized that many houses that appeared on paper to be in a different ownership are actually in a single ownership. And now there's a big block in Middle Subdivision that's owned by one entity. And so in Cox Road, we know the Donovans have a property. They have a site plan that they submitted previously. And that's on 5 acres, but there are 20 acres in that one area. And so if those properties were to redevelop, I mean, some of those houses are on 2+ acre lots, and they're being zoned for 8+ houses per acre. So when I calculate that, it can become much more intense. So how does our planning account for that instance?
I don't quite understand the question itself. I mean, the zoning is being proposed. It's RV2. It's currently RV. Those uses are allowed today. The property you mentioned that the Lot and Real was the applicant for would approve it at the current set of zoning standards, limit 35 feet. You can't say now by looking at these lots on a piece of paper what the actual development potential would be. The land is challenged with steep slopes. It's relatively close to the highway, which eats a lot of that land that you may think is private property. Suffice it to say, there's potential for the conversion of some of those lower density lots into more dense development for sure. So I think there's potential for some additional townhouse development in that area. Not great potential, but some.
And so what went into the decision to choose the lot size per dwelling unit and the density of that area?
Well, Commissioner, you were here throughout this process. This is the Planning Commission's work.
And this is not the Planning Commission's work. This was presented by you and proposed by you. And when I saw that the densities passed, I didn't really see any questions, so I'm asking those questions now.
Ms. Blackwell, to do what? Where are you going with this questioning? What are you asking for?
I'm asking for the reasoning behind the density chosen for the RV2.
The density was chosen because it was what existed prior. It didn't change. The Planning Commission had multiple opportunities to review densities proposed, the lot sizes, the various dimensional requirements, the land uses allowed, and settled on this set of outcomes. There are 10 or 11 set of amendments here that embody probably 100 separate text amendments. But those changes were not made to that RB2 district. You advocated for that consistently, but you were never able to achieve a vote in your favor. So the design is as set forth in the current code.
I advocated for it to be RV1. I have never discussed density. I haven't had the opportunity to discuss density.
Okay, Ms. Blackwell, would you like to make a motion?
No, I'd like to just discuss it further in a work session. I think that we could review and determine what appropriate density for that area would be. I'm not prepared to make a motion tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, looking back at the map or the text amendments, who else would like to discuss the text amendments, especially pertaining to our comments tonight? Who else on the dais? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Jakubiak, it's been brought up by a number of the speakers. In the event their present home was destroyed in a hurricane or some other weather event or unfortunate event, would they be able to reconstruct it at the current height if it exceeds the limit that we're proposing in the zoning amendments? Could you address that?
Yes. The current height in the residential high density zone is 35 or 50 feet. Reducing it to 35 feet is what's being proposed. If a house were destroyed by that type of event, it could be built back to its height. In fact, that standard would apply across the board within the town. There is a section of the zoning ordinance called non-conforming uses, section 290-28. It addresses both non-conforming structures and non-conforming uses. So if the ordinance changes and a house is taller than 35 feet, it would become non-conforming, legally non-conforming. So the owner gains the right to rebuild rebuild the house, reconstruct it, rehabilitate it, restore it. If it's destroyed by fire, windstorm, flood, explosion, or act of public enemy or accident. But the new structure cannot exceed the height the original height, but it could be over 35 feet. So the ordinance does protect non-conforming uses or non-conforming structures. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Who else would like to speak to these text amendments or to the map or to our comments?
I would like to speak to our comments.
Yes, Ms.
On the subject of the height.
Yes, please.
So lots of support for the height has been expressed. Could you go over the occurrence of a variance and how someone might be granted a variance for height, what might cause that? And also, is there any language that we can incorporate into our zoning text amendments that would limit one's ability to seek a variance for height?
So variances are considered a relief valve to the strict enforcement of the code. As strictly applied, the height would be 35 feet. Only under rare circumstances would someone be able to petition to obtain a variance. And it's the Board of Zoning Appeals that the town has that would hold a public hearing and make a decision. There are standards that are in place now, and they are related to Maryland case law, long history about establishing that there's something unique about the subject lot that makes a variance necessary in order to avoid a hardship. So you can imagine a situation where the lot was so encumbered by a steep slope, and in order to build into the hill, the front of the house would actually appear to be 37 feet tall because the sort of the basement entered right out onto the street. Odd situation, but it's related to the lay of the land. So I'm going to petition to the Board of Appeals and say, I just can't make reasonable use of my land without going this extra level. The only reason I'm going this level is because of this slope condition. So it's a condition like that, and it may not be the best example, but a condition that's tied to the lay of the land, the character of the physical character of the property, that becomes the rationale for approving a variance. The ability to ask and obtain a variance is foundational to planning. So steps to reduce the ability to get a variance raise a lot of questions and beyond my ability to answer right now. So it's something that we'd have to talk a little bit about, probably consult with the town's attorney to see what the parameters are for that. But as I said, the variance procedure is a relief valve so that people can make reasonable use of their land.
So are you saying that as our planner, the only time that you would recommend approval of a variance would be if it were associated with the lay of the land?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But as an applicant, the applicant makes the petition to the Board of Appeals. The staff, me, others, we don't always formulate a recommendation on any given proposal, but guide the Planning Commission into, as they deliberate on those issues. What I'm saying is that the lay of the land, the property, the unique condition is a foundational piece of the argument. You have to demonstrate that. It's one of the criteria necessary in order to obtain a variance. You have to be able to demonstrate that there's something unique about the property.
Yes, please.
Last month at the meeting, variance, the Board of Appeals met in a variance at 7515 B Street. And in that instance, I understand that the variance is part of a relief. But I also, I reside along B Street, so I'm very familiar with the location. And I think it really, you in your capacity as planning administrator, I think it would be, you said you don't always make recommendations. But I know, I'm a part of a commission and I don't have an extensive background. I wasn't trained that way. So on the Board of Appeals, I don't want to assume, but I don't believe that those members also have a strong background. I know that there was approval for the variance 7515 that allows one house to be built next to another house under 3 feet. And to me, it seemed there should have been a recommendation by you, because you're a planning administrator, to reposition that house so it sat, although the lot size was only 3,200 feet, it should have been a recommendation as a member of the town to recommend that the house be maybe repositioned on the center of the lot, regardless of whether there was approval 10 years ago to position the house in a specific location. Because now we have a circumstance where I don't think anybody would want a house built so close to their neighbor. And I think we need to safeguard that type of thing doesn't happen, even though it might be procedural code. I just feel like, I don't know, logic, I would hope would step in and assist in that part. Because I still believe, although it was approved, it's a fire hazard, that house, if it catches on fire, B Street is an alley. By the time the fire trucks get there, more than one house is going to be impacted.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. Ms. Blackwelder, did you complete your discussion about variances?
I have a couple more things about variances. So in the town commercial zone, it's proposed at a 13 dwelling unit per acre density. The requirement is that the residential is ancillary to commercial, so you've got parking for both things. I don't know how anybody can actually accomplish that. And so where does that leave the laws? I mean, can somebody take that to court and say that the height restriction is not appropriate because we're allowing a density that doesn't even fit? And I don't understand why that's the density proposed there.
That's not a density provision or cap in a typical sense. It relates the allowable residential units to the square footage of the lot. But the primary use is residential, so it allows an apartment or two, perhaps more, above a commercial building. But the building height does, in fact, and it's universal, it's not unusual, but the building height often constrains the density that could otherwise be achievable on property. And so there sometimes are consistencies. Sometimes it worked out depending on the lot size, but it's not always the case that that every standard points exactly the same condition. Sometimes there are competing objectives, and the standards allow for the property owner to respond to maximize their benefit of the property while remaining consistent with the standards. So there's, it's hard to say to have a standard that's equates to every condition in a black box. It's much more,
So I think our guidance as a commission was that we would want to allow an apartment over a commercial entity, a unit in the town commercial zone. But somehow we got 13 dwelling units per acre. Is there can you talk about a more reasonable density in that area? Because I don't think 13 dwelling units per acre is there. Not at the height that we're allowed. So at least we could make our densities that we're proposing logically feasible. Something we could work on in our session. Just a comment for now.
Okay, so Ms. Blackwell, do you want to include on our workshop that we're going to discuss densities?
Yes.
Strictly, that's amendment number so we will tonight. We will have more discussion about that on the work on August 4th. Okay, who else would like to make? Yes, Ms. Mudke.
Yeah, I have two comments. Coming to the Plan Commission with no experience in planning and zoning issues, I was excited to be on it, but it was a little intimidating. And to Kathleen's point, I think that Chris, whoever's going to be the planner, needs to take a position, because for us to do anything else, I don't want to say we're winging it. We're not winging it. We have lots of conversation and thoughtful conversation, but I certainly think with the Board of Appeals that would be very useful. The second thing I wanted to say was I was overwhelmed by the number of people who want to protect the green space. I mean, this is the first meeting that I'd been at where it was paramount, it was numero uno. And I think, at least certainly for this meeting, the message is very clear. Protect what we have, don't take it away, etc. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Radke. Ms. Hahn, did you have anything you wanted to add to this with the comments that we've had from our speakers tonight?
Yes. Can you all hear me? I appreciate you all showing up and expressing how you feel, especially about our wildlife, about our beautiful area, and that I think we should really discuss marking particularly on the map that we're protecting like they requested. That we discussed on August 4th.
Mr. Jakubiak, could you address that idea of adding the FIDs and the different things on the zoning map? I think
The
there's some
zoning map should
questions
only,
on that.
I think a zoning map should only show what is specific and legal and ties into the being governed. But I think it's a question for the town attorney, if we can add kind of that type of content to it. We have it on the land use plan, we have it elsewhere, but if he's okay with having that type of non-substantive type of content on the plan to characterize and give more of a sense of what is out there and what the priorities of the town are, besides the zoning district boundaries and the zoning categories, then I'm fine and with that. And if it's, as long as it doesn't disguise or interfere with the legal content of this legal document, then it's fine. But I'd refer that to Todd Pounds.
Councilor, do you want to make a comment about that?
Yeah, briefly, basically, when this document is created and finalized, it's going to have to go before the council to actually to be an ordinance. Okay, it's going to be the law. That's going to be the law. So you have to, in essence, create the document for the law. Now, if you want to create another document to have an overlay or to show what the FIDs are or any other overlays, that's great. Okay, you can do that. But first of all, you've got to create the law which establishes what the zoning categories and what the zoning map is. Any overlays created after that are at the discretion of the planners, but for the law to be created, it has to be what the law is first. Any overlays, such as what the FIDs is or anything else, it's fine to be put on top. Later.
Thank you, Mr. Pounds. And now we already have the overlays, right? Mr. Kubiak?
Yeah, I think it would be. In fact, on the land use map, we have the FIDs designated.
Which is in our comprehensive plan. So if everybody has a copy of it, they can see our land use map, which has the FIDs designation, the little bird.
Maybe overlay the forest conservation easements as well.
But we'll also be working on the critical area here coming up, and it'll be addressed in there, I believe, also.
And we'd have a critical area zoning map. It's a separate map because it changes independent of the town zoning map. It's two different documents, two different set of regulations, but we do have a critical areas map as well.
If I could make a few comments.
Yes, would you mind, Ms. Blackwell?
Yes,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
There was a comment from the public about Beach Elementary and the impact on schools. That is discussed in the comprehensive plan. The Beach Elementary is, I think most of you know, is being expanded. It was based on a study of the anticipated demand for students, and as I believe also they did, there was studies for local high school, and the school size to what they expect that demand to be. So I would encourage you, if you haven't seen it, if you aren't satisfied with it, that's one. If you haven't seen that, I believe that's discussed in our comprehensive plan about the impact of schools. The open requirements has been discussed with the commission. Quite a bit of increase. If you look at Amendment 10 as one example of how we have attempted to decrease the impact on the community of additional development. So that's all done. Maybe it's insufficient. If you feel that way, then we need to know that. But there has been an attempt to do that. And the same thing with the resource conservation area. It is significantly expanded over what it was previously. And so there have been efforts to address what we understand as this preserving the small town feel in the plan. We need to hear more from you if you think it's insufficient, but those efforts have been made. There is relatively little room within the town for expansion, for new builds. The 35-foot height limit will significantly decrease opportunities for more buildings like Horizons on the Bay, or any other tall buildings that would add additional residents to the community. We also comprehensive plan the impact on roads that we expected, looked at studies from that have been done on the anticipated impact on roads, including that from the new rod and reel developments over there. Those were all studied, they were all looked at, and so I would hope that you have confidence that at least we addressed the issues that you're concerned about, or listen to the issues that you're concerned about.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Blackwelder?
Yes, one point on the roads. Do we have capacity data on the new rod and reel building yet? Because I haven't seen any.
Lori, would you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
We have capacity data. The new rod and reel has been revised, and when we received the site plans, the capacity data wasn't included. And so I'm wondering where, if we do have that, and I assume that any traffic study would have been based on some new capacity data.
Actually, I'd rather stick tonight, and I'm not sure that comment.
Okay.
Really thank you. Ms. Hahn, did you want to continue? I'm sorry, you had some more comments.
No, not for right now.
Okay. Mrs. Brault. Okay, I think if everybody has, did you want to add anything, Mrs. Redgate? You're done?
I said my
Okay,
piece.
so I think what we need to do then is we need to discuss more evidently on density for sure. Let's just discuss which is going to be residential and commercial, it looks like. Amendment 1. Actually, we've got a couple amendments that would probably deal with. And of course, we've got the RC, the zoning of the RC, which I think we've got a lot of concerns and issues about the RC. I know there was a question about the RPC going to RC and which one is more protective. Mr. Jakubiak has been addressing that. I know with videos and emails. Do you want to make one more comment about that again here tonight, Mr. Jakubiak?
I have some questions about that
Zoning
as
issues.
well, Chairman.
Let me just make sure Mr. Jakubiak finishes this up. So did you want to make one comment about that here?
Just comment for the record, the resource conservation zone is certainly more protective than the residential planned community district. And by and large, within the existing subdivisions, those open spaces with an RC zone have another layer of protection. However, those areas are, I think, almost exclusively covered by some type of protective measure now. There's certainly platted open space within the subdivisions. And the resource conservation zone provides a zoning category that matches up with the land use plan.
I think
So
the
it
other.
implements that recommendation to preserve those areas.
Thank
of
you.
open space.
I think the other concern is the resource conservation and what can be developed in the RC map. So we might want to discuss that at our workshop as well. I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwell, did you comment?
Yes, some clarification. So in the FIDS covenant, in paragraph 5, it says, whereas grantee acknowledges that the grantor is required to convey the property upon which this covenant shall run to the Richfield Station House or similar entity in conjunction with subdivision of further areas of Richfield Station. And so my question is, could you explain that process and how that might be impacted by the resource conservation zone, or how does one trigger that conveyance to occur?
Commissioner Blackwell, can I just intercede? What was that reference you were making?
The FIDS.
Okay.
The reference I'm making is to the FIDS
Right.
covenant.
Thank you.
And so we received a memo from you way back in, looks like it was in September. And it says, the parcel and the entire Richfield Station subdivision is presently zoned residential plan community, which is a zone classification, i.e. subdivided, and apart from 2 small sections, it has been completely developed. There are no more lots to be created. The 202.7 acre open space is preserved open space. It cannot be developed. And then it says, upon adoption of this new updated comprehensive plan, the town, if the town wanted to amend the official zoning map to change the zoning of this land, it could. In which case, there is a zoning classification that is already available for use called resource conservation. So I'm having a problem with the logic here because the resource conservation has to provide a use, but the master planned community of Richfield Station is already master platted. There's no more lots to be platted. So I'm having a problem with the logic of why resource conservation in this case is more protective of something that's already completely platted. And I also would like assurance that the developer, after rezoning, would still have a requirement to buy the property. And then I have a follow-on question that involves my community as well. But could you elaborate on those items?
The zoning of the property does not change the underlying protective mechanism. It's protected open space by agreement. The land cannot be developed. The zoning category is, as I said, the most restrictive zoning category the town has available. If the town didn't zone that property and didn't zone the open space within the various communities as resource conservation, they would remain as platted open space. Most of them are protected further by FIDS or forest conservation easement or stormwater management uses. So and to show those as resource derived from your deliberations of the Planning Commission, you might recall the first zoning map I showed didn't show this sort of fingers of resource conservation, but it's an added layer of protection that implements your vision for having a zoning category that would further protect those areas. As for the detailed question about the Section 5 of that agreement and triggering the conveyance, I can't answer that question.
So is it feasible that we would get that question before we rezoned answered?
It's feasible that you can ask for it. I won't have your answer for you, but perhaps they can refer to the town attorney.
And so related of my community, West Donovan, mentioned that Chesapeake Village was annexed. And he said you would remember, so it was annexed under your planning and zoning administration.
No, it wasn't.
It was not. So are you familiar with how Chesapeake Village came in? I mean, we in Chesapeake Village all are of the understanding that it came an entire entity with open space, stormwater management, etc., as a complete community. Is that not the case?
Came in like any subdivision does. There's nothing unique about it in that respect.
Okay. So our HOA, from what I understand, is trying to secure our open spaces, and this is word of mouth. They are saying there is a recording error that's causing difficulty. And so is there anything we can do on our zoning map to identify the boundaries of Chesapeake Village to make it easier for my HOA to secure our open spaces?
I doubt it. That's kind of a strategy I just can't advise you. I don't know.
I think you might have to talk to your attorney, your HOA attorney about that. Blackwelder. Any more questions about the RC that you're anything more about the RC?
I would like to put on our list to revisit the map and discuss whether it's best to leave the RPC as it is on our existing map.
Yes, Ms. Hahn.
Mr. Kubiak, this is the first time I've heard in reference to the September email that you sent out. So if you could help me understand, previously Richfield Station was zoned RPC, and it included platting everything out, and there was no more development, including the area that is now being rezoned RC. So if it was already platted out, and if I understand this correctly, once it was platted out, there was also the FIDS overlay that the FIDS was protected as part of that RPC. So if that FIDS was protected as part of that RPC, help me understand why it would benefit now, since it was already all platted and there would be no more development, including the FIDS. And my understanding is, from what she just said, the FIDS is to be protected as part of that plat of developing the whole parcel. Why would we now change it to RC, even though it's more protected? If I understood the comprehensive plan when I read it, it would also, by making it RC, it gives stronger protections, but there's also the possibility or the potential that in the future it could be developed. So could you help me understand that, if it's already RPC and it's already platted and it can't be built anymore, why we would change it to RC even though there's more protection, but there's still the potential of possibly developing it?
Making it zoned RC doesn't grant the potential for development. Its potential has been extinguished, right, by the agreement. Now, there is a clause in the agreement that allows the town to modify it, approved by the Maryland State Critical Area Commission, right? So there's a theoretical
FIDS
potential.
agreement, you mean.
The FIDS agreement. Just like any agreement that you have, there's a way to get out of it. But the intent of the agreement is to preserve this area in perpetuity. So having a different zoning category on it really doesn't change anything. You have the gold standard of protection. You have an agreement. The only thing short of that would be some type of public ownership of it, which seems to be something that there's a consensus that makes sense. And even then, public ownership is elected officials that control land, and if they own it. So the RC has the added layer of the most environmentally restrictive zoning category the town has sitting on top of it. So theoretically, if that agreement were to fall apart, there's an agreement, there's a zone category on it with the purpose of protecting the open space, the forest. So I know it's far-fetched, but it implements the commission's vision of maximum protection of the area. And that's why it's on.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all saying the same thing, and I just think we all want to protect the wildlife the best way that we can so that we don't lose the agreement and it potentially gets developed.
Right. And I think the agreement in place and the RC zoning that corresponds to the level of protection that exists there and the vision the town has for it, you know. But you weren't on the commission, but you might remember I described to the planning commission that the comprehensive plan shows the resource conservation, and it signals to everybody that it's the town's policy to protect these areas at least for the next 20 years, you know, and that's the plan. And there are different ways of protecting that. One way is to actually draw district boundaries and say that is the zoning category for it. And that was the way that we ended up. But that same approach can apply to any RC area, even the RC areas near the Wickersham subdivision that someone mentioned. Up here, you know, the steep hill and the low-lying areas. But those areas are shown as resource conservation, and they're, as on this map, you could also apply some type of overlay or some kind of tax standard that said, you know, any development in this particular area has to have at least, 40,000 square feet of open space to minimize the impact of steep slopes, or they have to go through a more intensive development review. It still implements the vision of resource conservation, but it doesn't zone it. But the Planning Commission adopted a zoning, or is prepared a zoning map that shows that uses the RC zoning category in these various conditions, because that provides the maximum protection of the open space, the forest, the steep slopes, the wetlands, and that's where we are.
Have you, Mr. Jakubiak, ever encountered a situation where a covenant was extinguished?
I haven't.
You haven't, in all your 20 years experience, you have never seen a covenant extinguished?
30 years experience.
30 years experience.
No, I just haven't. No.
Okay.
Just not to say that's not possible, but.
Right.
So, Mr. Jakubiak, explain, I think we've already had this question a couple of thousand times, but explain to everybody what are some of the ways that we can then tighten further the RC uses and the district? How can we tighten it up so that people feel like it is as protected as possible as far as the environmental sensitive areas, et cetera? What are some of the ways we can protect even further?
Me to further restrict the number of uses that are allowed? Well, you go to the table of permitted uses and you deselect those that are already shown as permitted. However, that runs the risk of making it practically a regulatory taking of property, right? And so if you're interested in going down that route, I think we really need to bring the town attorney into this discussion. As things stand, there are just a handful of uses that would be allowable. If you begin to make it more tight, you might as well just buy the property. You've extinguished the use potential of the property. So there's a lot of case law on that, and that's why every zoning category allows for some reasonable use, because we have protection of private property under our Constitution. And so that's why there are a handful of uses still allowed. If you didn't have any uses, then the zoning ordinance would be seriously flawed. So I don't know where you draw the line. I don't know where the tolerances are. It's something that we should refer to legal counsel if we go further.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Hahn.
Mr. Zubiak, what happens if we could add restrictive on 29010, the land use table, and that we basically say that, that we cover the FIDs, the FCS, and the FSOS that's mentioned in the comprehensive plan, that we cover it and basically say that if the property owner is going to develop on that land, that they must provide to the planning and zoning administrator and commission that whatever they're doing on that property, that does not remove the FIDS covenants or anything else like that to protect it.
But you understand that FIDS covenants protect the land already.
Correct. But I also understand, I live on Eagleview Drive, and previously when I purchased that property 20 years ago, we were told that there would be no building behind us to protect the eagles. And there was rezoning and there was a massive build behind it. And as part of that massive build, my understanding is the rest of the area was supposed to be protected by FIDS. So I'm just concerned, like, as you mentioned before, that you have an agreement, but there's always potential ways of getting out of that agreement. And I want to protect the land as the people that have shown tonight, they're concerned about protecting the land. So I want to, as best as we can, look at our options that are available to protect what we can put in place to protect it.
And not just to protect it, but have a fail state. Safe.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that it cannot go to the appeals board and they could potentially override it.
Right. And just to be clear, I know I'm being redundant, but there's no appealing the protection. And the protection that exists today didn't exist when that carve out that you're referring to was contemplated or proposed. It was before my time, but that would not have been allowed. This is FIDS habitat. You can look at the date. I think the agreement is 2005, I think, 2004.
I think it's 2006 and bought it in 2001.
Okay. So it came later. But listen, I think it's been a consistent, coherent policy from the town since the 2002 comprehensive plan to apply resource conservation to protect these open spaces to the extent possible, and coordination with the Critical Area Commission has helped the town establish that protective zone that we all embrace now. And so if there's things that may be necessary, may be outside of the realm of the zoning ordinance. There's only so much we can do in zoning. But again, here tonight, I don't have the answer, but we can add it to the list for discussion.
We'd like that if we can.
But just to be clear, it is fully protected as it sits in the RPC as shown on our existing land use map. Is that a true statement?
The land is protected by a FIDS habitat agreement, and that property is signified with a signal that with a insignia that says FIDS habitat on the land use plan. But it's the land use plan doesn't protect it. It's the agreement that protects it.
Right, but the zoning also protects it.
Well, the RPC zoning?
The RPC zoning,
No, it doesn't protect it.
the RPC zoning does not protect it.
No.
Not a master platted residential plan community is not fully protected.
It's not the zoning that protects it. The plat protects it, and the agreement protects it. Those are more important than this discussion of the zoning categories. So it's the fact that these spaces are shown as platted open space. They grant the rights to everyone in that subdivision. You can't extinguish these open spaces. You just can't willy-nilly extinguish them, remove them. They're protected through the plat. They require engagement with all the property owners, and the subdivision regulations provide guidance on how it is that various open spaces or any plat could be extinguished or modified. Very complicated and very difficult. So
Right.
It's the legal requirements that attend to the land. It's those agreements that are foundational to protecting it. The RPC doesn't protect it. The RPC did its job. It allowed development on the site.
Right. I guess I'm confused because I'm on Calvert County interactive maps all the time. Of them changing. So how could that have been? I mean, I can't think of how they could have changed because replatting would have had to go through both Richfield Station and our commission, but yet it did happen. And when I tried to look for the FIDS covenant with the county, I couldn't find it. And the person on the other end tried to look for it with me for about an hour. It was not able to be located by them.
Yeah,
And
it's recorded in land records. You can see the recordation number. It's on our
yes, we
comprehensive plan.
eventually found it. Yes.
Okay,
But
to make sure so the public knows it exists.
right. No, yes. Yes, I have a copy that's from the county, but I mean, way back when we were having these discussions about plotting this open space, I even have an email from you asking about this property, and you're asking what do I know about it? And you didn't know about the FIDs according to your email. So it's really important. I think it's safest in the residential plan community where Richfield Station has a say. And, it's not this ambiguous area that can change. That's just my viewpoint. I will share the emails with the commission and with the town. But I'd like to discuss that in our work session, keeping the RPC designation in place.
Mr. Jakubiak, I have a question actually. When we drew the lines for the RC, did we make sure that we did not cut through people's properties, or how is that delineated actually, or do we know?
Yeah, they correspond to property boundaries and lots. Some people own multiple lots. So maybe instances where a boundary crosses along a property boundary, but an an owner may own on both sides of the line. I certainly think that's probably the case within the Weckersham subdivision, where the series of smaller lots. And there, the district boundaries, the underlying resource of the land, more so than who owned it.
Right, but we're not cutting people's properties in half, two different zones. You know,
Not individual properties,
Okay.
or not individual parcels, but again, if someone owns multiple properties, multiple lots.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Han.
So on the map with the RC, looking at the where you rezoned it from the RPC in Richfield Station to the RC, there is areas that are included now in the RC that are HOA property that were included on here on the plats. So I just want to go on record of saying that. Can you tell me how that would affect it since you've now included it into the RC, even though it's HOA property?
It'd be immaterial. The HOA property is platted open space. It wouldn't change anything with respect to the ownership of the property.
So just to clarify, it's now considered open space because you've made it RC, but if we wanted to build on there, now we cannot.
Now it's open space because it's shown as open space on the plat. When the project was subdivided, it was created as an open space parcel. And its current zone is RPC because the entire subdivision was that. So the proposed zoning map designates those areas as RC, but it doesn't change anything with respect to ownership of the lot. The land is still protected as platted open space.
And you can't build on that.
Correct. It's
platted, therefore it is.
Yeah, it's shown. You look at the plat, it says open space.
In previously it was RPC, so we could build on it, correct? Because it's RPC and it's subdivision.
You couldn't build on it because it was open space, already platted as open space. The zoning didn't matter. It was platted as open space. The open space designation or the forest conservation designation was another layer of protection on the open space. That's the reason why it wasn't built on, or why it won't be built on.
Thank you.
So it has nothing to do with the zone.
Uh,
The fact that it's open space and it's platted, you can't build on it. It isn't related
Right.
to
It's
RPC
Right.
or RC.
right. The main reason you can't build on it is because it's open space in a subdivision platted and dedicated for use as open space. Yeah. And or covered by a forest conservation easement, which means you can't remove any trees. In other words, you can't do any disturbance on the property.
And so do fully platted neighborhoods enjoy any particular protections?
Sure.
What are those?
In with respect to open space?
Well, for
or-
example, Richfield Station is a fully platted residential planned community. And so what protections does that provide to Richfield Station as that fully platted community?
The open, I mean, what sense do you mean protection?
Well, what I mean is, so my understanding is that a residential planned community comes in, from what the county told me, both cluster developments and planned communities are maintained at the county level. I think you said residential planned communities are maintained at the state level. I think the county said cluster developments is what I think Chesapeake Village should be, is maintained at the county level as full communities. And so can anything break those up?
They're not full communities in any sense.
Or
of
as
the word.
complete communities?
Not complete. They're
Okay.
they're part of town. Everybody who's there enjoys the same benefits of property ownership that you would expect anywhere in the town. It just so happens that, I mean, the subdivision Chesapeake Village or Richfield Station, in many ways, is just like how the campgrounds are, or the middle subdivision or Wickersham subdivision. They were all subdivided at some point, and conferring the ability to transfer lots among private parties, placing protection on certain areas that will be protected permanently as open space, or dedicating certain roads as streets and public access ways. Same thing applies to your neighborhood and Richfield Station. Apart from that, there's no protection. There's an HOA court that governs itself and governs how the HOA open space is used and applies architectural design standards and the like. But from a zoning standpoint, well, let's leave it at that.
So I guess my question is more, would Richfield Station still have, I guess, purview over the FIDs if we were in that residential planned community? Will they still need the same votes that they need to change things? Will they still need all the same things that they need to do to change things in their community? If it's zoned outside
Yes,
of
the
that.
zoning won't change how the HOA interacts with this open space it owns or with the current 200-acre parcel, which is not owned by the HOA. The zoning designation won't change that.
They will still have purview over it,
They still have purview over the HOA open space that they own.
but not the FIDs.
They don't own that yet.
Right, but they have purview over it while it's within the RPC. Is that correct?
No purview over it. It's an agreement between the town and the owner, the grantor, and the Critical Area Commission is in essence a party to the agreement as well. The HOA is listed as a body or entity that may be eligible to take ownership of it, but the HOA is not a party to that agreement. They'd have no purview or control of that land.
So even as it sits in their RPC designation, the town can still do whatever it wants with that parcel without consulting Richfield Station or having a public hearing or?
The town can only do what allows it to do with respect to that property. And if it wanted to change it in any way or to build a trail in it, it would need to inform the grantor, which would be the current owner, And I would imagine probably whoever ultimately owned the property, if it wasn't the town, and would have to inform the state critical area commission, and the critical area commission would have to approve it. I don't know that I can't recall if there's a provision for a public hearing in the code or in the agreement, but so, and having the RPC zone or the RC zone is immaterial to all this discussion.
All right. Thank you. I think we should bring it back to the dais, or at least to the chair. It's at 9 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and speaking and participating in our hearing. I think we had a lot of material here to work on for our August 4th. I will ask for a motion for the 4th meeting. Do I have a second? In favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yeah.
This is quick and easy. I'm a photographer. So this is a white line. This is state-owned. Why does she here to be owned or
Sorry,
zoned
I've
by
damaged
something?
your property.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, right. That's just the
You see what I'm getting